Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. I'm J. Alexander Greenwood, your host. Of course, as always, call me Alex. You know, last episode we were so delighted to have author Jason McIntyre with us. Jason, author of THALO BLUE, The Devil's Right Hand, which is part of the Night Walkmen series. He's also the author of his latest book, which is Zed, a Dovetail Cove book, which is being published by Book Trope Publishing. We were so excited to talk to Jason last time when he was we were both discussing our work about series as well as discussing how the weather, which is kind of funny because I didn't tease him about this, but a lot of times when I talk to Jason, he's very much first about the weather, and but how the weather can be a character in a book. And just want to, without further ado, welcome back Jason McIntyre.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be back on Mysterious Goings On.
Yeah, what occurred to me, by the way, is that my mothership is Mysterious Goings On, and your mothership is The Farthest Reaches. It's just like we are so dramatic.
It is, yeah. It's almost borderline cheeseball,
It's totally cheeseball in my account.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, if people read my stuff don't realize that I like to make really bad puns and I'm cheesy and corny, then I think they're missing out on a lot of stuff.
I think one of my favorite things to hear from readers is I maybe have a bit of a reputation of being ultra serious. I haven't written a comedy, but there's funny things.
Oh yeah.
That take people aback, and they'll be reading and they'll be like, "Oh, and then there was this very deep scene, and then he cracked this joke, and I just lost it." And I thought that was hilarious, and that makes me so happy when I can actually crack up a reader.
Oh yeah. Well, and you've got to release that tension sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one thing. Yeah. That's what I do with mine too. I mean, my main character in my big series is a smartass, and he likes to crack wise, and he's got a imaginary friend, so to speak, who also cracks wise. So it's just my way of kind of letting the steam off a little bit for the reader.
Exactly, it's a set of valves, and I love that Simon character. Oh. I love how he's interjected at those moments, and he has his little speeches. They're usually short speeches, but they're usually quite on the nose, and that's what the best comedy is. It's the stuff that's actually true that you say out loud, and that's the best kind of comedy in my book. Yeah,
well, thank you. And I just think just so you know, the listeners, Simon is a kind of an alter ego, doppelganger, imaginary friend, figment of the main character's imagination, who chimes in every now and then with usually derisive comments, but it's really kind of a personification of the main character's id in a lot of ways, but it's also a personification of his insecurity and stuff like that. So as a writer, it's fun to use him as a device. It's funny, Jason, because I know you haven't read the whole series, but as you read the series, if you were to read it in a linear fashion, you'll see that Simon's voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter as Pilot becomes more and more normal, so to speak, and his life becomes more and more stable. Simon goes away, and he protests this a lot. So you'll see it's kind of like the volume gets turned up when things get really crappy, and when everything's kind of cool, the volume on Simon goes down. But anyway,
but I think Alex, this is an opportune time to drop the bombshell, which is that John Pilot doesn't exist, and actually the main character is Simon, and Simon created the John Pilot character in his own mind.
You dirty dog. You dirty dog. You totally gave it away. I can't believe you did that. You totally gave it away. Well, it's funny. When I did that book of short stories, Pilot 7, there was the temptation to flip the script a little bit more. But I just I thought it was too soon.
Give in to those temptations. You remember what I said. Once you create a world that readers like, the author can get away with anything. Almost anything. Yeah.
Well, let me ask a question. I'd like to talk a little bit about the writing life with you, but before I do, let me just ask you, who do you read? And I'm not putting you on the spot and saying name any of your friends, but just in general, who do you read, or what do you read when you're not working or when you are working?
Some of my favorites are, growing up, I read Dean Koontz a ton.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I think I grew out of Dean Koontz.
Well, it seemed like he was repeating himself quite a bit.
And that's exactly it. I read a ton of Stephen King. I was the guy in 9th grade math class with my textbook propped up on my desk and open, and inside of it, so that the teacher couldn't see it, was The Shining or something like that.
Yeah.
As I got older, I liked a lot of American classics.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Hemingway, which kind of informs a bit of the realism. Like you take genre writers like King and Kuntz, and you kind of throw in Hemingway and his ultra, simplistic language. Not a derogatory thing, just his mastery of the language, that he didn't need it to be any more purple than was necessary. But and then other writers as I got older and a bit more mature were Jeffrey Eugenides and Chuck Palahniuk. Just the way Chuck Palahniuk can flip perception.
Yeah.
He's a master at flipping the reader's perception and his own character's perception, and explaining that in such a believable and concise way. Just brilliant. And Jeffrey Eugenides, he can write anything. I mean, he hasn't written a ton. His published works are few, but just the gamut that he runs, and he's able to create entire worlds. He's just a talent.
I confess I don't know that author, but I'll check that out.
The Virgin Suicides.
Oh, okay.
Middlesex.
Okay.
Are two of my favorites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Part of my degree when I was in, getting my bachelor's my degree's in professional writing. And
is that so? That's new information for me.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm a trained writer.
I believe it. I just didn't know it for a fact.
I had to basically, for that degree, do a kind of a thesis, and mine, a lot of it was on the Raymond Chandler, the Ross MacDonald, the noir, Dashiell Hammett,
right,
noir writers, which has always been a favorite of mine. And my earliest books, which are just terrible, which I've never will put out, were aping all of those writers and trying to be hard boiled, and it didn't work. But I love that stuff. But actually, in a more contemporary contemporary stuff that I read, huge Gore Vidal fan.
Okay, yeah.
And he wrote a lot of historical fiction, of course, which my favorite book of all time would be Burr, which is about the notorious vice president of the United States who killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. But that book is phenomenal. But the whole series, The Last Empire, Hollywood, all of those were so good. And but he passed away a couple of years ago. But Gore Vidal is probably my favorite. A lot of people don't know this, but he wrote 2 mystery novels under a pseudonym of Edgar Box was the pseudonym, and he wrote 2 pretty decent mystery novels that were about PR men. And that's funny. The lead character is a PR guy, and I'm a PR guy. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. They're not the best books he ever wrote by any means, but they're fun. You can tell he was just having fun with them. And
fascinating.
Yeah, well, I've really that plays into what I like to read, and like I've tried to write in a more expansive fashion sometimes. But I've really worked over the years on saying more with fewer words, as Hemingway did. I don't by any means try to aspire to be like Hemingway, but I try for an economy with my words. Because I also read a lot of King, who I didn't read in school, and I didn't find till later in life. I just thought he was, whatever, I just thought he's probably not that great. He's just horror movies, and because I saw all the movies, and I thought, well, the books can't be any good because most of the movies weren't any good. And
right.
But then I started picking up his short stories, and which are phenomenal, and some of his other novels, like The Dead Zone is one of my favorite novels. And
yeah, his books that aren't classic horror, that don't rely on the scares and the blood and the gore,
right,
are his best work.
They are, aren't they?
And his shorter pieces, his shorter books, and his short stories and his novellas are his best stuff. When he writes a really long book, it is less quality, in my opinion, because he does get verbose.
I sometimes think that he doesn't have an editor willing to stand up to him, because
and after the success he's had, he's probably not going to find that editor on earth.
He's not. And I just read Bizarre Bad Dreams, which is his latest collection of short stories, and I have to say I was fairly disappointed in the book.
I know you were. Yeah,
it wasn't bad, but what I did, it's just, to me, it seemed a little bit like Leftovers. But the only thing I really enjoyed about it was he did something kind of fun, which I love to read, is when there's a preface to each short story where he kind of explains how it developed, and that to me is fun because I can hear his voice when he's telling what happened and how he arrived at that story.
Yeah, the thing that I sort of agree with you on that collection, and I sort of don't, because there were pieces in there that I thought were fantastic, and then there were pieces in there that I agree with you and say that these were things that he found kind of in the trunk at the foot of the bed, or something that he wrote a while ago, or that he always wanted to write and didn't really have the nerve. And now I feel like he's kind of reaching, I feel like in his mind he's reaching kind of this twilight of his career where he's doing his victory lap, and he's kind of putting things out that maybe are a bit for the prestige of it, or trying. There was one in there that's a kind of a lengthy poem that I didn't think was really good at all, and I thought it was him kind of trying to be a bit more literate or literary than maybe he has in the past. And I don't know, but some of them I did enjoy. I really did. Oh,
I did. I enjoyed some of them, but some of them you could see the ending coming, and I was just found them a little tedious. But who am I, to say that other than a reader? Because
everybody has a right. And Stephen King himself, he said, once you plunk your $20 down or whatever you pay for it, and you take that book home, it's yours. You can wear it as a hat for all I care. It's yours to do with what you will. If you don't like it, I apologize, but I had fun like crazy writing them.
Yeah.
If you don't have fun like crazy reading them, I'm sorry, but c'est la vie.
But that's the thing. And most of the stuff I read by him, I love. Full Dark, No Stars.
Phenomenal collection
of novellas. And his other collections, Different Season and the Graveyard Shift. All these other collections are so good.
Now, can I interrupt you for a second?
I wish you would.
Back to what you were talking about when you were talking about authors that you enjoy, and a couple of your first books that'll never see the light of day. First off, I think you should send them to me. I won't share them, I promise.
No.
But secondly, Dovetail Cove is a series of hopefully 10 books. I've written 9. I've put out 4. Some of them are written and waiting for the publishing cycle to begin. One of the great things about that series, or that collection of stories that take place on this island, is it's kind of become a bit of a playground, and I've been able to try different genres inspired by writers that I've admired. And I've actually written a noir, and I've actually written a mystery. Now, they're both colored by other things and kind of have that Jason McIntyre stamp on them, if there's such a thing. But at the heart of them, there is a detective story, like a murder mystery, where we're trying to find out not who killed the person, but actually who the victim is. So there's a bit of a twist there. And there's a legitimate noir story in there. And I had just crazy fun writing those. So in that instance, I share that with King. I had fun like hell writing these stories and trying these different things. So, I hope that readers like them when they come out. If they don't, they've paid their money. They can wear them as a hat for all I care, to be honest.
What about when you get a bad review, though?
Oh, I'll be honest. It does hurt. It hurts for a few minutes. I move on quickly, but and the older I get and the more writing I've done, the faster I move on. But it does hurt, especially when it's unfounded.
I still get wound up when you say unfounded. Like I talked in a previous podcast about someone who didn't even finish the book, but they saw a language they found objectionable, so they gave me a bad review. It's like, why? How malicious do you have to be to go out of your way to attack my work and hurt my work just because there's something, because you're the language police all of a sudden, but when somebody has a legit comment about, I was just bored by this, or this didn't float my boat, this was just this was okay, that's fine, because and then I've said this to people to their face, well, it's not for everybody. And I don't say that like the implication of saying it's not for everyone is not that you're a plebeian or you're a fool. It's just that it's not for everyone. Not everybody enjoys this stuff, I don't, I have tried to read Jonathan Franzen. I know he's a good writer. I don't enjoy his work. And sorry, doesn't, maybe I am a plebeian, but I know what I like, and I don't like that.
And that's kind of what I mean by unfounded, is the exact same thing. You didn't finish the book, so you're going to review it anyway. Or it's not your genre, but I'm going to review it anyway. Those kinds of things. But I think I have the same feelings as most indie and small press authors. Reviews are gold. Reviews are very important. They fuel sales. Right. They keep writers writing. Mm-hmm. But I one thing I don't think is that readers and beta readers don't understand that when we share a book for advanced press or advanced reviews, you don't have to write a lengthy review. We're not asking you to write, an analysis that you might have written of, say, To Kill a Mockingbird when you were in the 10th grade or something like that.
People don't get that, yeah.
No, they don't.
Well, exactly. It's really not that hard to write a review. You could just put how many stars and 2 sentences basically saying, oh, I really enjoyed this, although I didn't enjoy that, but overall, I think you should get this book, things like that. And I have people, and I have friends and family who they think they have to, give me a 5-star review, and I don't need that. It's nice, but unless it really did mean that much to you, I'd rather get an honest one. But I always finish that comment with, unless you hated it, and then I'd rather you just, if it's just going to be a 1-2 star review, maybe you just thanks anyway.
Yeah.
But frankly, I kind of think having a couple of negative reviews that are of substance, not negative because they didn't like the F word, actually can help sales of a book, because I think people will look when they're thinking about reading a book and buying a book, and they'll say, okay, look, he doesn't just have, all his friends and family giving him 5-star reviews. There's somebody who gave him a 3-star review.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've given 3-star reviews plenty of times. To me, 3 stars means perfectly worth the money. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. 4 and 5-star reviews are like, this had more than just a simple entertainment value. This had some transcendence to it. This made me want to read more by that writer.
I agree, and I think supporting the indie and small press authors and that community, I think it's invaluable to be constructive when you do a review. I agree with you. It doesn't need to be an analysis, but there could be some constructive criticism associated with, say, a 3-star review. This book could have been a 5-star review, but I felt that the character wasn't fleshed out, or something like that. Right. It doesn't need to be massive, but there could be some identifiers that maybe point to that author,
right,
who's a lot of the times starting out, and they don't have the backing of a big publisher,
right,
and a full-time editor to help them construct and build the perfect novel in their first and second books.
That's what happened to my first book. I didn't have a great editor. I had to go back and do a revised edition because I made so many mistakes.
Sure, and part of that learning process for that indie author or that new author is, 15 people out of 20 reviews have said the same thing about fleshing out this character. I'm going to work on that better for my next book.
Right. You know what I don't understand is like, this drives me crazy. And sometimes you see these professional reviewers do this, and I guess it's okay, but I don't need you to recount the entire plot for me in your review.
Hate it.
It's not a book report.
And when I do a review, I state that very clearly. I have no interest in giving any spoilers or plot details, because the book blurb, the publisher or the writer or whomever is selling you this book has seen fit to share with you the plot points that they want to use to sell this book. It's not for me to go outside of that and say, and then in the 3rd chapter we discover the killer's actually his brother. Oh my gosh, what if you were reading that review trying to decide to buy this book, and you read that and that wrecked the first third of that book for you, or the last third of that book? That's despicable, in my opinion.
It is despicable. Yeah. But, I think that goes back to, I think there's a book review or a book report mentality. People, that's what they equate it with. And I've given talks to people, and I've teased people and said, look, you don't have to prove you read the book by giving us a synopsis of the plot.
Exactly.
Just say what type of book it was, say what you think, move on. But yeah, speaking of moving on, we're almost done here again. My goodness, man, we're gonna have you back. But before we go, I'm gonna throw one more at you. We can go just a little longer here. I think our listeners are having fun. I know I am. Let me just throw one curve at you before we go. Just it's not even that great a question. Probably you're probably now all prepared and going.
Where do you get your ideas? Are you gonna ask me that?
Do you get asked that question?
Do I get asked that question? I do a lot, and what I tell interviewers is a riff on the same answer. In Canada here, there's a place called the Dollar Store, and I'm sure you've got lots in the US. I've seen them as I've driven through. You can get 10 ideas for $1, and boy, 8 of them are usually pretty good. 2 of them are dogs, but usually I just bring them right home. I open the bag and I start writing those 8 stories.
Well, I was going to say the Dovetail Co. series is 10, so that you got your money's worth.
There you go. Yeah, 2 of them are dogs. I won't tell you which ones.
It's so funny people ask that question, and I have no idea. I subscribe to Stephen King's On Writing book, his theory of, a story is like an unearthed fossil. And it's so funny because I go back, I know my first book, it was inspired by a true murder-suicide that occurred at a true place. And I just took that and,
you started excavating off that.
Right. And then I built a whole world around that true thing. But after that, it was just all pure. You know, it's funny. I have no idea how it happens, because I will just sit down and start, and it will just come out. And I'm not trying to be mystic or anything weird like that, and it doesn't always work. But generally with me, things come in spurts. I just tell myself, it's time, your subconscious or whatever's ready. I sit down at the keyboard and I start making things happen. Doesn't mean I don't change it later, but my first drafts just come out of me and I have no idea where they come from. What about you? Or do you outline? Are you a plotter or a pantser, or, you know?
Well, this brings up a point, and as you were talking, I was going to ask you, and I hope I can. What's your drafting process? You mentioned a first draft. So how many drafts does it take you to get?
When I started, oh my gosh, believe it or not, the first book there were at least 10 drafts over a period of almost 3 years, and then that doesn't count after I published it, finding some issues with it and having an editor look at it and revise that. So there's about 12 drafts of that book. But then Pilot's Key, the second book, I got it down to where there was about 6 drafts. And now, after Pilot's Ghost, Pilot's Blood, Pilot 7, I'm pretty much down to a first draft, a second draft, then a beta read draft, then I ship it off to my editor, and he or she returns it with the final. So I'm good about 4, maybe 5, just depends. What about you?
So when you say a draft, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I will give my experience in a sec, but when you say a draft, is that rewriting it? Is that rewriting certain scenes? Is it simply editing it, going through and editing pieces out, or changing language?
It depends. Beta readers often find inconsistencies that you just can't, you become copy blind to your own work. You can't find not only grammar and mistakes. I don't worry about that. I've got editors who can help me with my grammar and any spelling or weird sentence structure. It's not about the actual mechanics. And this is what I tell my beta readers. It's like, I appreciate you finding typos and crap like that, but I really want you to read it for the story.
Yeah.
And I've had some really sharp, wonderful beta readers over the years who come back. So usually, to answer your question, first draft, I write it, and that usually takes me anywhere from 3 weeks to a month. And then I put that away for about 2 weeks, come back to it, read it fresh, make some changes, offer it to beta readers, then make their changes if they make sense. Sometimes your beta readers are just totally like, don't get what you're doing, and it's funny. It's like they're like, I had a character in Pilot 7, and her name was Lambda. Taters Malley, the salty sea captain, kept calling her Lambada, and people kept changing that. I'm like, this is him.
It's humor, people.
Yeah, it's like, do you not? Taters would call somebody Lambada. That's what he would do. The forbidden dance. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm digressing. So that's what I mean by that. And then my editor will come back, and I've got, a copy editor who looks for mistakes like, grammar and spelling, which, spelling's not usually a problem. Spelling, because of spell check, usually what happens is just the wrong form of a word, like there or there. And I think everybody knows what I mean. You got there, THEIR, THERE. So what about you? What's your process?
Well, I'm probably going to either make some enemies or have people call me incredulous, but I don't write second drafts.
What?
No, anything that I've ever put out that is on a bookshelf or sitting on Amazon or anywhere to purchase has never had a second draft. Now, I edit profusely and I change and make corrections to the verbiage, but when I actually sit down at the keyboard to start writing, I pretty much have the feeling of the language that I want and the pacing figured out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have the pacing and I have the main characters figured out, like who they are, what they stand for, where they're headed. I don't know where they're going to go, ultimately plot-wise, but I have never been in a situation where I've had to rewrite a book or rewrite chapters or add new chapters or that kind of thing. In instances where I've felt that I've had to do that, I've scrapped the whole thing. There have been lots of books I've started and I haven't finished because they weren't working. I didn't do that pre-work in my head to get to the point where I was ready to write. That's just the way I am. Now, a book for me, like, say, The Devil's Right Hand, that's a long book for me anyway. That's a long book. It's something like 185,000 words or something like that. That's a 3-month process. And I subscribe to Stephen King. He says if a first draft takes you more than about 3 months, it's probably too long, which, when you look at some of his 1,100-page books, I wonder, did he blow through that in 3 months? That's amazing.
Especially since he's off coke. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Like, where does he get the hours in the day? Because I could not do that. But yeah, I spend about 3, maybe 4 months on a first draft of that length. I put it aside, and I come back to it sometimes months later, sometimes weeks later, and start the editing process. But I don't write second or third drafts. I haven't done that yet. Now, a shorter book, say Zed, which I think is 80,000 words. In print, it's something like 250 pages, something like that. That book, I did the first draft in about 3 weeks. And then I set it aside. That one I set aside for a longer period of time as I got the other books, the other first drafts, closer to finished, and kind of looked at them all together as a whole to see if the pacing and the whole thing would hold together before I sent it to betas.
Wow. Well,
smack, right? Like,
hats off to you.
What guy doesn't write a second draft?
Well,
I don't know.
Apparently the guy who writes some damn good books and has a 10-book contract. So there you have it. Well, everybody's process is different. And I love hearing about yours. And I think we're going to have you back if you have time. And of course, since you're not writing 10 drafts like me, you have more time. And you have a backlog of stuff ready to go.
But everybody, this is why I asked you the question, because everybody says a draft is a different thing. Some people redraft. They literally sit down and write the whole thing again. And some people do something which is closer to what you and I are describing, which is like a redrafting process, which is we go through and we change details and we add details and we remove things and we edit out chunks. I do that. Don't get me wrong. I do that. I don't rewrite anything.
Well, I've never. Well, the first book I did. I took out, because in the first book I was trying to get an agent, and I sent it around. I sent it to at least 100 agents, and I got about three responses, or 4 responses asking for partials. Partial, by the way, if you're not familiar, listeners, is they want the first 3 or 4 chapters. First, you send them a letter pitching the idea with a synopsis, and then if they ask for a partial, they're interested, so you send them, which is usually 3 or 4 chapters. And then out of that, 2 of them said, send me a full, which is, of course, the full manuscript. And out of that, I had one agent who basically said, we're thinking about making you an offer. And then that was in 2008, right before the economy tanked. And then I didn't hear from them. And then I finally got a hold of them, and they're just like, sorry, we're not taking any chances on anybody new right now because of the economy. And that made sense. So that's when I became indie. Oh, I guess somewhere in there I forgot to mention is that one of the agents said, this is pretty good, but you need to take out like the first, and there's a lot of exposition already in it. I had to take out about 50 pages of exposition.
Wow.
Because it wasn't. I mean, it's like there's some nuggets in here but one agent basically said, had I not known through the synopsis where this was gonna go, I would have quit after the first 20 pages because it's boring. Nobody really wants to hear. There's no point in hearing how John Pilot, how his marriage ended and how he got laid off from his job. I had all this stuff that way before he even left and went to Cross Township in there that nobody gives a crap about. So I took that out, and it's thankfully not in there now. But yeah, so I guess you're right, that process. But I've never just sat down and just completely rewritten something. No, I just
no. Okay,
no. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, that sounds horrible. What you mean, like just?
But some authors I've spoken with, they redraft. Like they sit down and they say, okay, I've written this chapter 1. I'm not happy with it. It's got to be redrafted. What's the point of the chapter? And once they figure out the point of it, they rewrite it. They literally sit with the existing chapter on a piece of paper beside them, and then they sit at the keyboard and write a new version of that.
No.
And that's what I mean when I say I don't redraft. There's no second draft.
No.
I do extensive editing, and I make sure that there's continuity. That's a big thing for me, because when you're spending, from beginning to end, this is going to be a 20-year process to write the Dovetail Cove.
Right.
Those 10 books, that's going to be a 20 years of my life. There's inconsistencies. I know that I've forgotten the names of characters or when they were born or what relationship they have with other characters. I know that I have. So I'm going to be counting on beta readers and the editorial folks at the publisher to help me with that for sure.
Well, this has been great. Definitely got to have you back. Where can they find you again?
I would love it if people stop by www.thefarthestreaches.com. Come and say hi. Go to Goodreads and type in my name. Go to Amazon and type in my name. Go to Google and type in my name. I'm easily found. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on the social media stuff. Yeah, I'm happy when people reach out. It's so funny when you do have somebody who has something to say and they finally get the nerve to say it in some instances, and they reach out and they say, I never thought you'd write me back. And I'm like, yeah, of course. You have no idea how excited I am that anybody read anything of mine, let alone wants to ask me a question about it or say they hated it or say they actually liked it. So that's a big thrill for me. It does not bother me at all if anyone has something to say, unless it's, threats to my pet turtle or something like that. I don't dig those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited that anybody would care. So please don't be shy.
You should really look into Zed, his latest. But there's also The Devil's Right Hand, The Night Walkman, THALO BLUE, On the Gathering Storm, which may be the first thing I read by you. Walkout, Bled, Shed. I guess I'm seeing a theme with the Duck Cove here.
Yeah.
Bled, Shed. That's hurting my head.
I'm going to ruin the surprise, but the titles all will rhyme. All 10 will rhyme. Well, I don't know where I came up with that, but I'll be honest, it's a gimmick. I don't know where I came up with it, but they actually do fit the stories. There's meaning behind them. Yeah,
well, you could get a little blue if you do one called Head, because you could be telling people you need to get. All right, never mind. This has been our guest, Jason McIntyre, wonderful writer.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
Oh, you bet.
It's been a pleasure. It always is.
Check out The Farthest Reaches. Check out his stuff. Write a review of this wonderful author. And again, if you're interested in my stuff, Mysterious Goings On is the place online. And you can find me on Amazon and all the other usual suspects. And don't forget the Facebook community for the John Pilate Mysteries. You can find that. Just plug John Pilate, Pilate, like Pilates without the S, like the Roman governor. That's who it is. Okay, at long last, I got to end this one. I appreciate you listening, and as always, keep reading.
Saturday, November 23rd.
They gave me 28 shock treatments and literally raped my soul.
A must-see documentary special.
We have a society where psychiatrists can put 400 volts through the brain of a child.
Electroshock is being passed off as therapy.
Therapy or torture. Saturday, November 23rd. Only on Scientology Network. DirecTV Channel 320 or online at Scientology.tv.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online.
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
And learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.